everyone. Welcome to our monthly live event. I'm Rachel Tufel, and today we are going to be talking all about pie crust and how that pie crust might work or not work for you. And I'm going to share a handful of really fun decorative ideas that you can do with your pie crust as well. So thank you for being here and joining me. I'm excited that it's almost Thanksgiving. We've got 1 week before the holiday, which means hopefully everyone is starting their preparations. I am baking off pies today, as you know, so I will certainly be ready for the holiday with a couple of different pies. I have a download for you. This is your pie crust download. This is a recipe that I love. It is a recipe that I've actually been using for a while now. I'll give you a little history and then we'll jump into pie dough tips and tricks and all those fun decorative additions. But while I make cake, pie is my favorite. If anybody is celebrating me in any way, I get pie, which is really exciting for me because pies are, I think, so versatile with flavors, with being savory or sweet. They can be very flavorful if you're adding fresh fruit or even using a frozen fruit. They can, obviously, as I said, be more savory. They can be more like protein filled with meats or eggs. They can be super sweet or mildly sweet. Like, there are so many different variations of pies out there. The beauty of this recipe is any kind of pie, doesn't matter what the filling is, this pie recipe is going to work for you, I promise. So I want to just look at the recipe with you and talk about a couple of points that I think are important to note, just so that when you're making your pie dough and getting ready for what I call pie season, that's Thanksgiving to me is pie season. But when you're getting ready to make your pie, I want to make sure you have all the information that you need in order to be successful with any pie recipe, whether you're using this recipe or a different one. Pies can be a little tricky when mixing your dough and getting just the right consistency to make sure that your pie dough is going to roll out without cracking, but still hold together well so that you can shape it the way that you need to, maybe create different decorations or cut out pieces, and it's not going to just melt and fall apart on you. So I want to talk a little bit about that so that you guys are ready to go and you have no questions when you start your pie dough recipe. As always, if you have questions along the way, don't hesitate to let me know. That's why we go live, so you can interact and ask questions. I would love to hear what type of pie you plan on making for your Thanksgiving holiday. And again, if you have questions along the way, let me know. So make sure you download this if you haven't already. But the pie recipe is fairly straightforward. I find this recipe to be one of the easier ones because you have a few options in the way that you can knead that dough together. The way that I describe it in your download is by utilizing a food processor. But don't stress if you don't have a food processor. You can use these. Just make sure they're nice and clean. This works really well. It just takes a little longer to get that dough to come together. But your hands in the kitchen, for me, are... oh my gosh, I love getting my hands into the dough. I love working with it. I love squashing it together. I like making it smooth. These literally, like, making pie dough itself is just very satisfying for me personally. Now, I used to not be good at making pies until I found this recipe. I've altered it a little bit to kind of meet my needs, but yeah, I was a really bad pie baker for a long time, but now I have, I can't say mastered. I can't say mastered the art of pie dough, but I definitely have come a very long way, and I am making some very delicious pie these days. So that's exciting for me. But the basis is that you're really just putting most of the ingredients together in one bowl, mixing it together until it starts to flake up and get crumbly, and then adding in some additional wet ingredients to bring it all together. So again, you can use a food processor, which will make this process very fast and easy. You can use your hands, which is going to be the longest of the processes, or if you have a KitchenAid mixer, you can use your dough hook. Now, I know a lot of people sort of shy away from using their dough hook. A lot of people tell me they just can never get their dough to come together for a pie crust. But, things like rising yeast breads and those types of things work extremely well in the KitchenAid mixer with your dough hook. But sometimes a crumbly dry dough, like a pie dough or a cookie crust, any of those like graham cracker crust, those types of things, they don't work as well. But I promise you this recipe works, and that's how I make it. I hate dragging out my food processor. I love that I have my KitchenAid mixer with me all the time, and so I just throw the dough hook on there, makes it nice and easy. It does take a little bit of time to get the butter incorporated with your flour, but there is a little bit of shortening in this recipe as well. That's for stability, so that it doesn't just like melt and sag and not hold its shape. Butter crusts do that, but I find that just that little bit of shortening in there really helps hold the structure of our dough together so that we can do more decorative type styling with our pie crust. So don't stress over the shortening. If you don't want to use shortening, just substitute it for butter. It's an easy substitution. I just, again, prefer it because it gives a slightly flakier feel in your mouth. And again, that stability piece to be able to decorate our pies is super important. So your flour, sugar, salt, and butter are what's going to go into the mixer or into your food processor or just into a giant bowl. Use a giant bowl so you can get in there and dig with your hands. And you want to knead in your butter. Now you can certainly use a pastry blender. That's the like curved piece that has multiple little knife sheaths on it, and you just sort of rock it in your bowl. You can use that too. But again, getting in there with your hands is just lots of fun. So I let my mixer do part of it, and I let my hands do part of it, so I don't, give myself tendonitis or anything, but it's a fun process. Once that starts to break up the butter, and you add your shortening in and get that broken up, and you have smaller pieces like pea-sized, and then you can actually start to work in some of your wet ingredients. So we're talking lemon juice, ice water, make sure it's ice water. We want to keep that butter cold, and then an egg yolk. So those are our flavor additions that we're going to add the moisture in order to bring all of that dough together. And when that dough comes together, you get this beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, delicious pie crust. It's amazing. I want to show it to you. This has been in the refrigerator overnight. So I made this last night. I put it in the refrigerator. It does have a little bit of salt in it. So I'm going to bring this up close to you guys so you can see. What happens is the salt, actually, you can probably see just those little specks of like lighter color in your dough. Those are just the specks of salt. So don't freak out when you open up your dough. Those little flecks are just the salt, and it's basically bleached some of the dough. Hi, Paul, watching from the Bahamas. Oh my gosh, boy, do I wish I were there with you. I am a beach girl all the way, and Bahamas is very high on my list of places to go when I need a little beach vacation. So I hope you're enjoying the weather for all of us and getting out into that beautiful ocean. Paul, we're making pie dough today. We are just through talking about the recipe, showing you a little bit of what that pie dough looks like. Give it a knead so that you can make it flexible and really be able to move that dough. Now, your dough should not be dry where it's just like breaking and ripping and falling. Nothing is falling on my table. You want this to be moist, but you don't want it to stick to your hands. So I can touch this and I have nothing on my fingers. Might be a little bit of butter there, like a little grease, but that's it. So you don't want your pie crust to be so soft that you can't work with it, but you also don't want it to be dry and crumbly. So that's where adding additional water in our mixing process comes together. So if your dough is in your bowl, you're squashing it together and it's just falling apart, add another teaspoon or tablespoon of water, depending upon how dry it is. You may need to keep adding, but be careful not to overdo it because you don't want wet and sticky either. Yeah, so make sure that you're using ice water to keep everything cold. And that ice water is the variable that I can give you a recommendation of 3 to 4 tablespoons like I have in the recipe, except that you have to be the final judge in the end to decide what your dough feels like. So I will tell you, I'm here in Colorado, it's dry, and I tend to use more like 5 tablespoons of water. It depends on the time of year though. If we're in pie season, getting ready for Thanksgiving, then I know that it's usually a little drier and I need a bit more water. If I, for some reason, am making pie in the spring when we're a bit more wet and have some humidity in the air, I don't use nearly as much. So you have to kind of give that judgment call or make that judgment call on your own because it's super important that your dough be the right consistency. Hi, Carrie, you're from Indiana. My goodness. Near my home in Ohio. That's where I grew up. So very familiar with Indiana, have some relatives there as well. Welcome. We're glad you're here. We're glad you're excited for pie crust. Pie crust is one of those tricky things that sometimes it works perfectly. The next time it doesn't. So let's switch over to working on our surface here. I'm going to show you how to get our dough rolled out and into our pie pan. I'm just going to wrap up the other pie dough so it doesn't get dry. If you don't think you're going to work with this right away, go ahead and put it back in the refrigerator. You don't want this to soften up, but we do need we need to have it pliable, right? So this is made of mostly butter, giving it a good squash on the counter. When it's firm like this, you can get in there, you can use your weight, get some stress out, but you can squash it a little bit, but that's what's going to help get that kneading process going. All right, so let's switch to our overhead cam so you guys can see what I am doing here. Oh, Max! We've got some behind the scenes people helping us out. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. So our dough is one of those things that you need to work it, get it moving, get the dough softened just a little bit. You don't want this to be hot. You really don't even want it to be warm. You want to keep it as cool as possible. So I am working with half of my recipe. I'm going to put down just a little bit of flour. You can do it the fancy way, which is just kind of tossing it. You can use a little, oh gosh, sieve. Losing my words already. But you want to make sure that your surface is floured. Now I'm working on granite here. If you don't have granite, you could always, if you have a porous surface, you'll want to put something down. Even just parchment or saran wrap will work. But shape it into a circle. That is the size of my pie plate is circular, obviously. So we want to make sure that my plate itself ends up, or the dough ends up fitting. So if you're using a square pan, you can absolutely roll this into a square. If you're using round, obviously go round, but start with your shape. if you're doing a cookie sheet pie, we didn't talk about that, but you could do a cookie sheet pie. And basically it turns into like pie bars instead of like a nice thick piece of pie. But that's a great way to be able to do a variety of fillings. You can just divide up your sheet pan a little bit. So I'm rolling this out. I have a floured surface. If I feel like it gets stuck at all, you want to make sure that you're moving your pie dough. So there's flour on here, but you can see kind of in the center, it's getting stuck and wearing out that lovely powdered surface we have. Just keep it moving. Give it a twist every once in a while. That is going to be the key to not only keeping it from sticking, but to also get a nice even roll. So we have a tendency to just always push, back and forth. That's totally fine. You can push back and forth and that's okay. But eventually you either have to turn the dough or turn your roller just to make sure that you're getting sort of that circular look that we're going for here. And again, I can feel like I'm sticking just a little bit. I'm going to pull this back and just put down a little bit more. Don't be afraid of flour. I know that a lot of people start worrying, oh, my dough is going to be dry if I put too much flour on the surface. If your dough is the perfect consistency, nice and pliable, it doesn't matter if you're adding just a little bit of flour to the bottom. Now, we don't want to go crazy with the flour and put too much on there, but having enough flour under your surface to roll this out is important so that it doesn't stick and get stuck to our surface. Okay, so this is what you want. This is holding together. So it's coming apart on the edges just a little bit. That's normal. Don't stress over that. Don't try to piece them together. I'm going to show you this part over here. So if you were to have a crack that kind of comes into your pie, into the center of the pie dough, don't stress over that. Just lift it up and give it a little tug and crimp it down. Now, I didn't have to do that because I know it's big enough, but I want to show you so that you guys can fix your pie mistakes if you need to. I'm pressing it down just so it adheres, and then a little bit of flour on my rolling pin. And there you go. This is one of those doughs that mends to itself well. Most doughs do, as long as it's not too dry. But that is kind of the easiest way to get your dough to seam back together if it's not the right shape. Now, if it's the right shape and you've got it wide enough to fit your pan, so what I'm doing is just setting my pan over top so that I can see how large my pie crust is. You can also flip it over and go that way. So I know I've got plenty of room. Now we need a little excess. It's about an inch or so outside of this pan because of course we have to accommodate for the depth of the pan. So make sure that you've got a little, I'm just gonna move my camera so you guys can actually see the whole thing. But just make sure that you have enough room. Now, the easiest way that I have found is just to fold my dough in half. This is just a bench scraper. You could use a spatula. You could also just use your hands. You're gonna fold it into a quarter. So just make that little triangular piece. Now you're gonna put your triangular point right in the center of your pie dough. And I like to just kind of give it a little push down so it's gonna stay put now. Unfold. And then we have the last part, which unfolds as well. And then just use your fingers to push down gently, gentle with pie crust, to make sure that we have our pie crust all the way down to that bottom edge. And that you can always pull it back if you feel like there's an air pocket. Pull it back, let that air pocket out, and put it back together. And this is how you are going to make sure that your dough doesn't like bubble up in the center. If you have a major air bubble under there, that could be problematic. The other option you have to prevent that is just docking it. That's which just means pressing your fork into it. And you do want to get all the way down to the pan. So don't just like lightly tap. It's not there for decoration. It's there to release any air bubbles that get trapped underneath the dough, because that air is going to expand underneath the dough. And so our dough will actually bubble up and move the filling out of the way. And then when you cut your pie, it's not as pretty. So no stress if you forget to do it. Oftentimes it's not a problem, but if you want a very pretty pie and a beautiful slice, that's the key. Now, in a couple of places, I am going to fold over. So I folded over my dough just a little bit to make sure that I wasn't stretching and tearing it. And I have a spot over here. Let me see, where's the best? That's probably the best view for you guys. I am just going to use my finger to push the dough up and flatten it out. And I'm going to leave that for a moment. I'll show you why. But I also have another one here. This is kind of like, if you work with fondant at all, you will know that, you know, it sort of bubbles up, buckles over. Just manipulate it with your hands. Get it to where you want to be. Again, I have a little fold here. Just going to stretch it a little, move it where I need it. And then I'm going to grab a knife and I'm going to go around the outside edge of my plate. And this is just to trim off and have a really nice edge for my pie. Now, when we get to the decorating part, I'll show you how you have a couple of options. But let's talk about it while I'm just trimming. You can imprint this edge and then bring your crust, your top crust right up to the edge. Or you can tuck this up and underneath your pie crust as well when you put your top on. But if you have any spots like this, remember this is the bottom edge. Nobody's going to see this. I just take a little bit of dough and I try to bring a flat edge here and just squash it together. And then work it into the edges of your dough and trim it again. Totally fine. Don't stress over this bottom piece, because I know for sure that with my decorations, I'm actually going to cover this edge, so nobody's going to know that it wasn't perfect from the start. So again, don't stress over that. Just get your little pieces in there, squash it together. You do want to make sure that you have plenty of dough here though. So one of the things I could have done was rolled this just a little bit wider, and then I would have kind of gotten away from all that breakage that was on the edges. But no big deal. So now this is ready to just go in the refrigerator. Now, if you were planning on just putting a fruit filling in here, or let's say you're making pumpkin pie and you don't need a crust on top, you can actually do two things. You have a choice. If you feel like this dough has gotten very soft and it's just squashing and it's warm, please put this in the refrigerator for about 15 to 20 minutes. Let it chill back up. Mix up your pumpkin batter and then pour it in and bake it off. But if you're going to use this with a double crust, which is what we're going to do today, the double crust pie, it's best if you can put this in the refrigerator while you're rolling out your other dough. So let me just tuck this away for a second. I promise we will have a beautiful dough. I actually have another one in here already, but I'm running out of room in my refrigerator because it's that time of year. So I'm going to leave my cold one out, and that way my new one can start chilling. Okay, so when you are making a double dough pie, or a double crust pie is what they call it, it just simply means that you have dough on top and bottom, which is why my recipe has two crusts in there. You can use this pie recipe to make two single pies, like two pumpkin pies without extra crust covering the whole pie, or you can make one double pie, your choice. So you've got a lot of flexibility. If you just need one single pie and you want to save this dough, you can wrap it up tight, put it in a Ziploc bag, and throw it in the freezer. So you can definitely save this dough, or you can just make it in advance. So I know a lot of people like to bake their pies off the day before their celebrations, or maybe the morning of. You can absolutely do that. You just need to wrap it very tightly with saran wrap, and then tuck it into a Ziploc bag and toss it in the freezer. Very, very easy dough that comes together nicely. And then again, you can just wrap and freeze, pull it out as you need it. If you know you're going to make 2 single pies, I do recommend splitting the dough first. That way you're only pulling one dough out at a time. It makes it a little easier for you. If you're making a double, no stress, just pull it out and off you go. So we're making our double pie. We're actually making, well, I'm making a apple pear pie. So it's a tiny little twist on the more traditional classic apple pie. I've got pears in there. It's a lovely autumn fruit that works extremely well with apples. So apples and pears go together great. Love them individually and together. I actually really love pear pie. I don't know if people really even think that that's a thing or not. I think it's a thing, but not everybody does. I'm just going to flip this over because that side was just getting a little wonky on me. But that recipe is coming soon to our blog. So if you're looking for a lovely filling for your pies, that is going to be on the blog probably within the next couple of days here. But I always try to link to social media. Oftentimes we'll send out a quick email if you're already a member or if you've signed up for our newsletter. So do those things if you can. Paul or Carrie, what kind of pies are you going to be making for Thanksgiving? Or anybody else who's joined us? What kind of pie is your favorite pie? Well, I'm getting this second crust rolled out. Let us know in the comments which pie is either your favorite or what you plan on making, because I'm always looking for new ideas. Last week, I made pumpkin and pecan. We had a little Friendsgiving action going on, and I did pumpkin and pecan, and I did my apple pear just to practice and make sure that my recipe was perfect. Sometimes I like to change up the ratios of the fruit and just kind of be fun with that. All right, I'm just putting a little water on because I had a lot of flour back here and I wanted to like reshape this just a little bit. It was getting a little wonky on me, but just a little water. If there's too much flour there, you can always reshape. Now for the top, if you plan on making a round pie and you're just going to put the entire crust on the pie and then either crimp the edges or have a little fun with some extra dough decorations on top, you obviously want to make sure that this dough is rolled out to that shape. One of the things with making decorative accents on your pies, as in the photo from the download that I sent you, that beautiful pie crust that's there, that one is a little different. You don't have to have a round crust because you're just cutting out shapes, you're cutting out strips, and you can literally, just use the edges. You don't have to have a beautiful, perfect pie crust rolled out for that. All right, Carrie's making classic apples. It's her go-to. Yeah, I love the classic apple as well. I also have, so I'm also doing a cherry pie. So my dad is coming into town this week. So we're doing a little early Turkey Day celebration with him. And so we're making his favorite, which is cherry. And of course, the apple is my favorite. Well, the apple pear, sorry. I got to throw the pears in there. Just adds a little bit more sweetness than sort of that classic apple pie. Okay, so I have my pie dough rolled out. I want to make sure that it's still moving underneath. Okay. And when you're ready to do any sort of decorative items, utilizing things like cookie cutters, whether they are just regular shaped, or you can do leaves, which is always a fun accent for this kind of fall holiday season. But you can also do different types of cutters that these have impressions on the inside of them. And so I'm going to show it to you so you can see it, but when you cut out the dough and you just hit this plunger a little bit, it actually leaves the imprint of the pattern that's below. And so this is a kind of a really neat way to be able to add some more texture and decor to your pies without doing anything too crazy, right? Sometimes I have lots of time to make pies, and other times I'm just like, can I just get the pie done and in the oven because I don't have time for all the decoration? And that's okay, right? Like we all have our own schedules. We all have our own preferences. So if you have extra time, utilizing things like this is a great way just to add a little bit more decor to your pies. Obviously, just using shapes is an easy way to do that as well. I do recommend, if you can, transfer these to a piece of parchment on a cookie sheet. And the reason for that is we want to make sure that we chill all of these pieces before we start adding them to our pie. Because our pie dough is made from butter, they warm quickly. So the more we touch these, the longer they're sitting out, then, it becomes a bit of a problem stretching these pieces when we go to pick them up. So I like to be able to put them on a piece of parchment kind of right when I'm cutting them, so I know they're not going to soften over time. And then I'll just pop this in the refrigerator for a few minutes before I start decorating the top of my pie. So just keep that in mind. You can cut different shapes. I actually cut a bunch of shapes already, but I want to show you a few of the shapes that I decided to do. And then I want to show you the strips that I made in order to do some braids and those types of things. So on the pie in the photo for this tutorial, I have diamonds, triangles, and circles, and they're all slightly different in size. I did that on purpose just for some variation. I wanted to show you, one, that you could put all of these shapes on one pie if you really wanted to. And that's why I sort of stuck with the geometric theme. But you could always just pick one or two of these styles and put that on your entire pie. So you've got lots of variation there. Now, in the way of creating your strips, if you are, not usually in the kitchen making pastry and you don't have a pastry wheel, you can absolutely still use your knife. I just eyeball it. I don't stress over using a ruler here. If you would like to use a ruler, by all means, go for it. But pies are rustic. They don't need to have perfection. Probably why I like pies so much. It's a nice change up from the luxury wedding cakes that I make. I like making a couple of different thicknesses too. So maybe they're a little thinner, maybe they're a little thicker. If you're going to braid them, I recommend utilizing something that is a little bit thinner. It works easier. Just going to move this out of the way so that we can continue to play with our crust here. Always play with your food. That is my number one rule, at least in my house. Okay, so to braid this, we've got two thinner pieces of our crust. I have just a little bit of water here. This is just to attach the two pieces together, give a little squash, and now they're not going anywhere. And the reason why I'm using that water is because I know I had flour on my surface and it was a pretty heavy dose so that it wouldn't stick. So I know that I needed just a little bit of adhesive there. Water is fine. And then you're literally just going to cross one over the other, pull one to the opposite direction. It's really easy to get this beautiful braid. You'll notice I'm only picking up one at a time and kind of sliding the other one. And that's really just to be sure that I'm not breaking them. You know, they're fragile. It's not like they're going to, they might stretch a little bit. This dough is just absolutely fabulous for decorating pies because it does stretch a little bit, but it doesn't actually, I guess it does rip apart, but we'll do with this piece, this scrap piece. So just a little bit of tension, you'll see it starts to stretch before it actually breaks. So it takes a lot of effort to actually ruin this dough. I know it can be done, but it takes a lot of effort. And I like to just pinch off the edges of my braid just so that then I can pick it up nicely and I know it's not going to go anywhere. And just slide it over to your surface so that you can refrigerate that later. Now, sometimes with the stripes or the little strips of dough that I have, I like to add a little extra decor to them. You don't have to go crazy, but if you want to, you can. So one way to do it is I like using things that we already have, right? Just adding decor from your fork. Just the tines of your fork will do the trick. Just a little pressure that gives some texture. It's not a lot, but it does give some texture. And then just pick it up and give it a little stretch and it'll get rid of a lot of that irregularity. You can also do that and then cut them, and that's a little bit straighter. And then the other option, which I really like this one because it's a bit more modern, is just poking holes down the center. It's almost like we are, you know how you tack down a ribbon with just a line of stitching through the middle? It's kind of like that. It's fun. So I'm just trying to give you guys as many options as I can so that you know what you can do and how easy these are. You can take a piece and just twist itself. So I'm going to give you lots of options. Because that's what I do. I love just like playing and showing. So you can see I had just a little bit of a tear there, but pinch it back together, it's fine. And then if you want, you can create almost like a ribbon. So you have to lift it up a little bit, but you're basically going to crimp just that little fold. Each time you lift, you crimp. And this just, again, creates almost like a ribbon effect. It's fun, it's easy. It adds texture to your pie in the sense of how it looks, but it's not going to be, you know, so over the top heavy with crust that you can't cut through it or you can't enjoy, you know, what's below. So, you know, a lot of people worry, oh, is it too much crust? In my opinion, you can never have too much crust. That is usually my favorite part of the entire pie. In fact, my husband, I don't know about you guys, but I feel fortunate to have a husband that doesn't like that thick crust on the edges. I love it. So he eats the rest of the pie and gives me the top of the crust. It's a great relationship that we have. It works really well for us. So these are just a couple of options that you have in the way of, you know, just using something that you have already at home. Now, if you happen to also be a cake decorator, you might have a few other items around, things like impression mats or stencils. And in that case, if you want to get, you know, real spunky with your pie dough, you can actually roll your pie dough. I'm going to move these for a second so I don't get all of these flattened a different direction with my rolling pin. This particular one is best done like when you're adding it to the pie. Otherwise, it just kind of unravels. This one is great because it just stays together. But if you have a stencil and you want to imprint it, it's very easy to do just by applying a little bit of pressure with your mat. just like that. And I'm going to peel this back and show you a little bit, but not all of it. It might be hard to see actually until it's actually baked and those areas kind of fluff up a little bit more. But one of the other things I really enjoy doing, which again adds another dimension to our decorating, this is something that I would do on a pie that has the full top on it. So maybe if I were making, like for the cherry pie, for instance, I would probably roll this into a circle and use my mat. But a little bit of egg wash just on the stenciled part. So, give that a good press and then apply your egg wash. So one thing that's going to happen with this, if you bake it, you pull this off and bake it just as it is, then you will actually, these pieces that are egg washed will be a deeper brown color in comparison to the rest of the crust. And so you're actually like painting on a design, if that's a thing. But you could actually, now that I say the word painting, you could actually paint with food color here too. So that's one more, way that you can add decor. But the other way that I love adding, another layer of texture and decor is just by using sanding sugar. Now, sanding sugar is itty bitty. It is very fine in comparison to even granulated sugar, and it tends to have a bit more sparkle and color. But I have my egg wash on here, so I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of the sugar, and I'm just going to spread it around onto my stencil. And what this does is it then just sticks wherever that stenciled egg wash is. And the pattern that is revealed below is just beautiful. Are you ready? I just love it. It's so pretty. So this is, one more way that you can decorate your pies that is super easy. But my goodness, how impressive would this be for anyone to, display for their holiday celebrations? I mean, it's just gorgeous. So keep in mind that this is an option. You could absolutely go in and do additional shapes to make this smaller for like what we're going to do with our different shapes on our pie crust. You could cut strips out of this as well and use them. You sort of lose that pattern just a little bit. But even if you did half of your pie with this and then did some other decorations, like that's a really cool way to do it too. So how exciting are these decorations? Are you guys like learning anything? Because that's, of course, my goal is to teach you something new to do with pie. Do you think you would try any of these techniques? Do you feel like they're attainable? I absolutely will say that these are the easiest ways to be able to decorate pie and still have a very impressive decoration. So let's go ahead and pull out our frozen, it's not frozen, pull out our pie dough that is in the refrigerator. I'm going to set this aside because I'm going to show you how cool that is on the pie. Just going to clean this up for a moment, get that out of our way. And then let me grab my chilled dough. All right, so we have our pie. It's docked. I just nicked it as I brought it out. Oh, I am known for that. Lots of fixes is usually what happens. I'm in a rush, moving too fast, and I always kind of nick different things. So this is our pie dough. It's nice and cool. It's been in the refrigerator for about a half an hour chilling now. And I have an amazing apple pear filling that I made this morning. That's one thing with fruits like apples, pears, those types of fruits. It really is important that you mix this up basically just before you're ready to put it in your pie dough, because we want to make sure that they don't go brown. Now, there's definitely lemon juice and sugar on these. So they've got some protection against the browning, but we want them to be firm when they go into our pan, because the cooking process is obviously going to soften them. So if we're using a fruit that is just really mushy already or over ripened, for instance, then we're going to be in a little bit of trouble when we go to bake this off. It's just going to disintegrate. So we don't want that. We want nice, fresh fruit. I have a tendency, especially with the pears, to grab some that aren't quite ripe, so they're a little firmer, just about ripe, but not quite ripe. That makes the best pie, in my opinion. You still get all that great flavor, but you don't have to worry about the texture being just complete mush. So move that fruit around. Again, this recipe will be up on our blog soon. I don't know the exact day. I just know it's coming soon. So keep an eye out for that. But this can be just a straight up apple pie. If you don't want to add the pears, you certainly don't have to. But I do think it's a nice addition. Now, as far as how full you should make this, there's a couple of thoughts behind that. The first one is, again, these are going to cook down a little bit. So if you pile this too high and your crust starts to firm before the apples, start to soften and lose a little bit of their juices, well, then your crust will be way up here and you'll have that big air gap between the two. One of the ways to combat that is actually by not cooking your pie so hot. So a lot of people will recommend that you bake your pie at 425 for 15 minutes and then you lower the temperature to 350 and continue baking. To me, all that does is it crisps everything up so that when the apples cook, you're left with that dome, that empty air dome underneath. So I don't do that. I just bake at 350. Takes a little longer, but I like that. But the other thing is just using, a firm fruit or cooking it down in advance a little bit. So if you cook your apples just a little bit, they will lose some of their firmness, and then they won't. The water isn't going to escape out of them so quickly. Okay, so that's as much as I'm going to put in there. It's a nice round, little bit of a dome, but not a whole lot going on there. So when my crust, I'm going to push it down too. I like to pack it in because I don't want that extra space, that little bit of air that's there. And then I'm going to grab my tray. I got all of these cut out in advance, so you guys didn't have to watch me cut circles and squares and all that good stuff. And I'm going to show you first what I want to do with the sprinkle that we did earlier. So this is our egg wash. It's one egg and just a little bit of water, like a tablespoon or so. You just want it to be mixed well so you don't have any big globs of egg going on here. Again, this is going to give our pie crust a little color as it bakes, but the process that I'm doing right now is more so that the crust or the dough pieces that I'm going to add will actually stick. And any spots where I don't have dough are now covered, and so they will have a nice browning effect as well. So I am going to put this piece right here just on part of my pie. This is kind of the fun, what I've declared is the fun part. Everybody has their own, their favorite part about making pies. My favorite part is eating. I don't know. I just absolutely love pie. It's the best. Just going to use my knife to trim around. And now you have this beautiful decorative section. You can then add other items. to like finish it off, so to speak. So this is one of those stitched strips that I was talking about. They're cold, so I can actually manipulate them without too much bending or struggle. And just a soft push on either end, and then I'll trim this. I'm gonna go with one more of that patch, or the strip with the little lines, and then maybe switch over to some geometric shapes. I'm just gonna gently touch each of these. Now, you could come in and put a little bit of egg wash or even just some water here to make sure that they don't, you know, slide around. You can do that. I have baked these with and without that little adhesive piece. Your choice. Do whatever you'd like. This will just keep them tacked down so that they don't move a whole lot. But I like to be able to kind of manipulate them and move them around so I don't push too hard, because sometimes I change my mind. I do generally lay out my pattern on my sheet sometimes. So that's another way to be able to just have that pattern done ahead of time, so you're not like on the fly trying to decide what to do with your design. Sometimes that's the scary part. Rose, thank you. I am so glad that you have found these tips to be helpful. Baking pies is really, truly an easy process. But if you don't know some of these tips and tricks, it can be a little challenging. Sometimes it's trial and error. I know for myself, a lot of things that I do, I'm just exploring, trying to decide what I think might work or not work. You know, it's all about just getting in there, getting your hands dirty, trying something out. All right. Any favorite decor that you guys are seeing so far? Like anything that you really love here that you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to put that on my next pie. I absolutely, like, I could spend hours decorating. That is by far my favorite part of my job, is designing and decorating, you know, coming up with a cool pattern or just a different way to do something, or repurposing some of our, you know, normal uses for something, right? So some of these have a little bit too much flour. And if that's the case, oh, I'm dipping off the screen, but I'm just putting a little bit of egg wash on them just so that they'll stick together. And this one's kind of coming to the edge here, so I want to make sure it doesn't move around a whole lot. But I'm basically just brushing a little egg wash on there. And I'm going to stop at 4 there. And then I had a piece that broke, but don't ever throw these broken pieces away or, you know, pile them back up into your dough. Use them. They're super easy to use on the edges. So just, I'm going to poke this one because I feel like it needs a little extra something there. All right, just like that. And then when you are ready, again, you just come back with your knife, trim off those edges. And then we're gonna do one more egg wash over the whole thing. And because I decided to do the sugar on this side, I'm actually gonna show you a little trick for being able to put sugar. I'm gonna put sugar just on this one here. So let's egg wash. Don't egg wash over our sugar piece yet. That already has what it needs. But be gentle, especially if you have pieces that aren't, you know, fully secured down. Sometimes that can cause a problem for you. So, you know, be gentle. Go with the direction of your decor rather than against it, or just sort of, you know, off the side there. We're almost done, you guys, just a couple more minutes. So if you have any questions or comments. I want to hear them because we're almost finished. It looks like Carrie said you would just do a bunch of the braided ones. That would be gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. That braided one is probably my favorite style, especially if I'm just doing an open pie like this apple pie. That braid is absolutely beautiful. Okay, so same sugar into a little piping bag. If you don't have a piping bag, don't stress, just use a sandwich bag and cut off the corner. But I'm just going to cut a little bit of the tip off here. I'm going to come to the side, but that's about as much. I'm going to cut it off so I don't get it stuck to my pie. And then this way you can control where your sugar goes. You know, sometimes the big bag, the big containers that we have are just so big that they end up sprinkling everything. So just sometimes that hole doesn't like to stay open. So hang on one second. If you just crease it with your fingers, there we go. And so now I'm just decorating that one edge. It's a way to kind of pull the decor from one side of our pie to the other side of our pie. And I think I actually want to do this one too. I changed my mind. I was just going to do the one, but now I'm like, no, I think we need a little more. So this is that sanding sugar. You could also use granulated sugar. It's not going to be as sparkly, but it definitely will still give a beautiful look. It adds a little bit of, you know, sweetness as well to the crust, which is great. And I really love it because it's a beautiful addition to just the decor of the pie in general. And then, you know, obviously you can do anything that you would like. I just randomly just decided I wanted to put a line down these circles. You can do that. It's not much, but it's something. And, you know, I just felt like they were a little too wide and open. It's also going to help cinch them together a little bit. So, you know, have fun. Do whatever you would like with your pie crust. Nothing is off limits, in my opinion. It has gorgeous, just absolutely gorgeous decor on it. It's fun. It's different. It didn't take very long. So I think that's the other thing to keep in mind here, that, you know, it just is one of those things that it's a little bit of time, but my goodness, the presentation for your guests at your next event would be absolutely beautiful. And even if you're just doing it for yourself, oftentimes I just bake because it feels good, right? It gives me a sense of accomplishment. It allows me to serve something both beautiful and delicious. And it's just one of my favorite things to do. Even though my job requires me to bake, I still love baking for myself. And I think that it's a real stress relief, and it helps just like calm my mind. So I hope you guys, of course, get that same feeling when you all have an opportunity to bake. I want to thank all of you for being here and joining me. I hope all of you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Give this pie recipe a try, and then come back and let us know in the comments how much you love it. I promise you will. It's got this delicious, light, flaky crust. It's got a little bit of salt in there, so it balances the sweet. It's just perfect. So happy Thanksgiving, everyone. We'll see you next month.